The next big kid on the block are the Mycenaeans, and I know that's a mouthful. It's a civilization that is dominant from about 1600 to 1100 BC, so still in the same time period as, say, the Harappans or the Zhou when they're quite strong. And it's a civilization that's named after a town called Mycenae that was excavated first by a German archaeologist by the name of Heinrich Schliemann. We know from digging around there, we people, that there were a bunch of these types of places, and they were kind of a loose confederation of states. But what they had in common was cities that all looked more or less the same. They had really fortified, heavily defended palace complexes that were built on hills surrounded by big stone walls. So that tells us something, right? First, that if they have huge walls and lots of defense, that they're probably pretty militaristic. We also know from their geography that they'd be loosely connected because the geography doesn't lend itself to people interacting well with each other. We know that royal family lived inside, most people lived outside. They used Linear B. They spoke something very similar to ancient Greek. And we know from those Linear B tablets that there was a social hierarchy with a king at the top and army commanders, priests and government officials, free citizen soldiers, and at the very bottom, a slave population. They were militarily aggressive. Their walls and their cities tell us this, but so too do tons of swords and other weapons that have been discovered there. And according to a guy named Homer, that may or may not have been a person, and some of you may be familiar with, around 1250 BC, they start a war with some folks in modern-day Turkey or Asia Minor, a group of people known as the Trojans. This is the Trojan War. And there's some archaeological evidence that backs this up, and a lot of people suggest that this war convinces lots of different cities that don't necessarily have a lot in common to unite against a common enemy. So according to Homer, these guys get together, they sack the city of Troy, led by a king by the name of Agamemnon, and this is kind of a great epic that forms the basis of a lot of Greek identity. People uniting together against somebody, they fight together, that common enemy, and what that fight does is it highlights virtues that makes Greeks different from people who live there, and also, in their mind's eye, makes them superior. We'll dig into Homer a little bit later. Around 1100 or so, these folks are overrun by another group of people, so that's the next slide.